so glad that you're here with me today as I offer this talk on crying and the importance of crying and why we cry and the benefits of crying. There's been about 25 years of anecdotal evidence showing that crying is helpful, especially for our kids. And there's been a bunch of research as well that I'm looking forward to just addressing briefly today. So first, I'd like us to just consider the birth of our babies. It's one of the first few things that babies do when they come into the world. They take a deep breath and they cry. They're not even able to regulate their heat, their temperature in their bodies so well without us helping. There's even a lot of breathing, pacing variability and heart rate variability. It benefits them to be near another mammal that they can co-regulate their breathing pace and their heart rate variability with. But crying is there right away. It's showing how important crying is to the health and wellness of a human body. Even 6 to 8 weeks before laughing, crying comes right away. Why? What's the benefit of crying? So Robert Sapolsky, a Harvard University graduate and a professor of neuroscience and biology at Stanford University, asked the same question. And he got really curious about animals in the wild and why animals in the wild are, especially prey, they're being threatened daily. Really stressful experiences they're having, but they don't develop the same kinds of health-related conditions that we develop as humans, like ulcers. So he wrote a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. I encourage you to take a look at it. And in his work, his theory is that their heart rates get elevated, they have signs and they show indicators of stress, but what they do afterwards seems to help. And what they tend to do afterwards, even for those animals that freeze in the moment, so the impala, for instance, gets dragged to the den of the predator, and it plays dead in the moment, so it freezes in the moment. But after that, once the lion goes down to its den to get something, the impala jumps up and runs away and shakes. Even animals that were in the process of getting caught and were shot with a tranquilizer, once they wake up from that anesthesia, when they wake up, we see them tremble and shake. So there's something about trembling and shaking and running or breathing really fast and quickly that's incredibly helpful to offload tension and stress from the body. And we can think about a baby. Why would a baby cry when it comes out of the womb, either taken out of the womb through C-section or birthed through the birth canal? Because it's a stressful experience. And we can hear the baby's heartbeat and heart rate through the heart rate monitor on the baby. And we know that it goes through phases of stress during the labor process. So it's a stressful experience, and when the baby comes out, it knows already, inborn in that baby is wisdom for offloading stress, for the health and wellness of its organism. It's a self-corrective experience. It brings it back to a place of health and wellness when it can cry, when it can offload tension and stress. So it's helpful to really consider that when our children are crying, that's a wise thing for them to do, and it's self-corrective. Most of us human beings hear crying, and it elicits distress within us because of mirror neurons, those cells in the brain that help us emotionally connect with another human being, which causes us to laugh when we see characters on a movie screen laughing or telling a funny joke, the whole movie theater laughs at the same time and causes us to cry when something touching happens between them. If the actors are really good actors and they're believable, it engenders tears in us, and most of the eyes in the theater are wet at the same time. That's because of our mirror neurons. It connects us. The emotion connects us. One of the beautiful things about us as humans is we have these emotional responses that connect us, that bring us closer. So, this ability to cry in our children can elicit a distress in us. Their loud, unpleasant emotions can cause us to get distressed. And if we're not comfortable with that emotional state in ourselves, we will automatically try to get the child to stop crying. And that's one level. So discomfort, uncomfortable sounds and uncomfortable emotions are usually aversive for most of us, and we want to stop them. And then there's another level, another layer here of societal conditioning that we've mostly been taught, that crying is for wimps and that it's a sign of weakness and that it's not good for us and we should just smile and say that everything's okay. That's conventional wisdom, that's societal conditioning. So we've also been raised by our own parents. Most of us have been raised in this way. And so we have years and years of modeling. And modeling is one way that we humans learn very deeply how to respond to life situations, just automatically. So when a baby's crying and we feel distressed ourselves, and there's this automatic natural response to want to get away from that distress, we also have these years of conditioning from how our own parents responded to our distress that's in us, and we tend to work with those schemas unless we consciously shift or change them. We'll want to stop this baby from crying. The first cry, usually we celebrate, it's a healthy baby, and then after that, we try to stop. So, how do people try to stop crying in babies? Shh, 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 don't cry, it's okay. No, look. Rattling, looking, distracting, all from a place of love. All from a place of love and care. Lots and lots of ways that we've designed to help stop a baby from crying. But what if all of that work we're doing to stop the baby from crying is getting in the way of one of its basic human needs, to offload stress, to offload tension? Under the mentorship of Patty Wiffler, who founded Hand in Hand Parenting over 20 years ago, I learned that, and I saw with my own eyes in her presence as she worked with children, the benefits of crying. And for the first time in my whole life, as I watched Patty working with children, I saw her saying to a crying baby and toddler, "That's it, honey. Keep going. Tell me all about it." She wasn't rocking, she wasn't shushing, she wasn't dangling, she wasn't distracting. Patty Wiffler was fully confident and comfortable with this baby crying. She had a warm smile. She was fully engaged and connected. She wasn't distancing herself by having to go into the other room in order to stay regulated herself. She was connected and present and witnessing this baby and toddler, and I also saw her do this with young children. And she herself remained regulated and relaxed and open and present, and not only was neutral to the crying, so not only did she not try to get the baby to stop crying, she encouraged the crying. It was the first time in my life that I saw someone encourage a cry. And she can't do that unless she really believes that there's benefit. And so what I'm trying to offer you today is a shift in mindset. We won't be able to be present with a crying baby if we think it's going to cause them damage and cause them harm. And that's conventional wisdom, that letting a baby cry is harmful. And one caveat to that is that there is evidence that letting a baby cry all by itself for hours and hours and hours, for months and weeks, that it can be very traumatizing to a baby. And actually, it's interesting what happens when that happens to a baby. What happens is over time, the baby stops crying, like forever. One of the most apparent signs that a baby is not well, that it's become depressed, that it's not thriving as a human being in this life, is its inability to cry. So if you were to walk into an orphanage 60 years ago, when they were overcrowded with babies and the caregivers didn't know the importance of holding babies and talking to them and interacting with them, the babies were just left in their own cribs. A lot of those babies weren't crying. They were failing to thrive. So actually the lack of a healthy cry, the lack of a good cry, is a sign of illness and dis-ease. The presence of a good cry is a sign of health and wellness. So I'd like to share some more research with you around this. So I already talked about Robert Sapolsky's work with animals in the wild. And just to mention that work again, when a animal is threatened in the wild, animals typically will shake after their lives are threatened. So the lives of prey are threatened, and that animal will shake and run away or breathe hard. And even the impala that will freeze when it's being dragged to the lion's den, even after that, when it wakes up, it will then run and shake off stress. So this capacity for crying actually allows us to shake off stress and offload tension. I liken it to the breath in yoga called Kapalabhati, rapid diaphragmatic breathing. So Kapalabhati looks like this. I'll just show you briefly. I'm not sure if you can see my diaphragm here, but it moves in and out very quickly. And that happens when we laugh and when we cry. So when we cry, you can watch my belly a little bit. So there's an in and out of the diaphragm. There's a rapid diaphragmatic movement that's deeply in our major muscle groups, in our belly organs and the organs in our belly, tensing and releasing very quickly, relieving stress, releasing stress. Judith Orliff, a psychiatrist, who wrote a book called Emotional Freedom, shows that after a good cry, there's our heart rate, our resting heart rate is a little bit lower. Our blood pressure is a little bit lower. It decreases our blood pressure after a good cry. And a good cry even stimulates a cascade of events leading to release of endorphins, feel-good hormones. So having a good cry actually supports us in feeling better. And William Frey, who is a wonderful researcher at Stanford, was interested in emotional tears versus reflex tears. So what's the difference? So emotional tears happen when we're feeling emotional, and it can be either very positive emotion. Sometimes we cry at a wedding because it brings up so much love and beauty and goodness, and it's very touching, and it's so touching it's a little stressful and we cry. And it's overwhelmingly beautiful. And we also cry emotional tears when we're upset or sad or scared or really frustrated. Most of our children cry when they're little because they're really frustrated, and there's a lot of frustrating things that happen in their little lives. And then on the other hand, reflex tears happen when, for instance, we cut an onion or when wind moves through our faces really quickly. So what's the difference between these two tears? Is there a difference? Dr. Frey asked. And what he found was, yes, there's a difference. When we cry emotional tears, he studied them in the Petri dish and found that, I don't know if it's a Petri dish, he studied them somehow. I'm not sure how he collected them exactly. But what he found was that they contain stress hormones and neurotransmitters related to stress, toxins. So just like we urinate to relieve toxins from the body, we also sweat to relieve toxins from the body. And when we cry emotional tears, it helps to relieve toxins and stress hormones from our body. It's an exocrine process. And we all know, well, we're well aware that damage happens when we stop natural exocrine processes from happening. It causes a blockage, and those blockages can cause harm, physical symptoms in our bodies. So by stopping our tears all the time, it can lead to physical illness. It can lead to health-related conditions. And this is true. I'm just reaching out to get my notes here. Margaret Crupeau found that people with stress-related illnesses cry less than their healthy counterparts. She did a study and found that people with stress-related illnesses cry less than their healthy counterparts. And in a Michigan study, they looked at women who repressed their anger and versus women who found healthy outlets for their anger. Not that it's useful to express our anger at our children or at anybody. I'm really an advocate for finding healthy expressions of anger instead of just allowing our anger to come out unconsciously on someone else and hurt them. But women who repressed their anger were twice as likely to die from heart attack, stroke, or cancer. So there's something important about being able to express, just like expressing milk. If there's milk that needs to be expressed and we stop that milk from being expressed, or our breasts stop that milk from being expressed, it causes very painful conditions in the body, mastitis. And so too, that when we are not able to express our unpleasant emotions, whether it's anger or frustration, or tears or crying, it can lead to physical ailments, health-related conditions. John Sarno has done some beautiful work around this with back pain and also other somatic conditions such as migraines. And he showed that his work is showing us that a lot of these chronic physical ailments, these chronic pain conditions, are related to the repression of unpleasant emotions such as rage and frustration. And he has helped hundreds and hundreds of people, and now his followers, the people he's mentored, have worked with hundreds and hundreds of people. So now there's thousands of people who have cured their back pain, and I know one of them personally, who had back pain for 10 years, flat on her back, was cured by simply recognizing that this pain wasn't so much about the body, it was about the heart. It was about a blockage in permission to express deep, unpleasant feelings. So as parents raising children or teens or babies, as parents, we have a powerful opportunity to support our children with exploring their healthy emotional release. That's self-corrective in nature. And this doesn't mean to be permissive. I want to be really clear. This is often a misunderstanding. I believe it's incredibly important to set clear limits, to be confident and clear and even firm in our limits without being harsh. We can be very clear and very firm without being harsh, and will, I believe, be much more effective if we can do that. And that when children bump up against those limits, that's one of the times that they will most likely have big feelings. So the idea is to say no to whatever behavior we're setting a limit on, and say yes to their big feelings, yes to their emotional release. And that when we can stay connected with them and not demand that they go away, or not need to go away ourselves, which sometimes we'll need to do for our own self-regulation so we don't get too mad if we're starting to feel ourselves getting really triggered by their crying. If we can stay present and connected over time, it will help them learn how to regulate themselves. Because of this process of downloading our ability to regulate, in the moment, as we're staying connected and present, as they're offloading their feelings, we're modeling something deep. Because of our mirror neurons, we're probably going to get a little triggered and we'll rev up emotionally into our own states of frustration and annoyance with this. And if we can regulate ourselves, if we can down-regulate, if we can kind of downshift, so to speak, emotionally, and stay making contact, their brain bodies, their mind and bodies experience that, and it changes them. This is from Dan Siegel's work on interpersonal neurobiology, and he explains beautifully how our minds and our brains interact with each other's brains and bodies to shape who our children are. This is how that happens. In these emotional moments, when we can stay connected in the midst of them trembling and crying, and we can come close and stay calm and demonstrate our own regulation in the midst of their overwhelm. Then we might start to tremble a little bit too, and then we regulate. We start to tremble a little bit too, and then we regulate. What won't be helpful is if we start trembling so much that we're just as distressed as they are. And if that's happening, it's helpful for us to leave and say, I'm taking a time out. That's what I recommend. Other people advocate for encouraging the child to take a time out. If that's true, if you're doing that, what I would recommend is inviting them to take a positive time out, which is different than a punishment. Instead of sending them to their rooms, it's helpful to offer, it might be a good time to go to your peaceful place that we've set up with your stuffy, and take a blanket, whatever you need, to be there. So you can have some time to yourself and nourish yourself a little bit. So if we can't be that comforting presence for them, it's helpful for us to encourage them to find a comforting place to be that will support them. What tends to happen when they move away from us at that point is that they discontinue crying right away. So it's regulating in the sense that they stop crying, but it probably won't help them get to the bottom of that tension that's there. So this comes from what I call attention theory. Tension theory, not attention theory, but a theory that I call tension theory. And it's based off of Patty Whiffler's 25 years of anecdotal evidence showing that when we can stay calm and close and relaxed without a lot of tension as our children cry, it actually helps them offload such deep tension that they are more settled in their bodies afterwards. They can focus better. They can take in more information. They're often much more cooperative for an extended amount of time. It's powerful, and I've seen this happen again and again and again, not only in children I've seen Patty work with, but also my own child and other people as a therapist and counselor that I've encouraged to try this. I've seen great shifts happen immediately, right away. The younger the child is, the more dramatic the shifts happen more quickly. But it's true in older children too. And, we can think about it ourselves, like, what happens if I go into a therapist's office and I'm crying about something, and the therapist were to say to me, you're just a mess right now. Go out into the waiting room and until you stop crying, and you can come back in here when you stop. Like, You know, a therapist would never say that, and if a therapist did say that, we would probably not go back to that therapist again. Or what if we came home and told our husband that our best friend just passed away, and he said, you are out of control with those tears. Stop that crying right now, and then you can talk to me. But this is the message we usually give our children, often out of love, like, shh, stop, honey. No, shh, stop. No. We give messages to our children from the first week of their life that this is not a good thing that they're doing. And yet there's plenty of research that shows that it's healthy and wise to cry, to have a good full body sob, a wail, wailing and sobbing and shaking and breathing hard to release tension and stress. Indeed, William Frey said that he believes that trying to stop our emotional offloading and stop the tears from coming can put us into very unpleasant physical states. He said it could lead to an increase in weakened immune system. It can lead to poor digestion, and there are some other things too that I'm not remembering right now, but other physical ailments as well. Poor digestion, weakened immune system, and sleep problems. So this ability to let go of our tears, to offload our emotional tension, is healthy. There's plenty of research that shows that it's healthy. And yet most of us around the whole world, this is not just an American thing, this is a global condition. This conventional wisdom in parenting is global. Most of us as parents try to help our children stop their feelings instead of giving them the message, what you're doing is healthy and wise, and I'm here to support you through it. One of the fears in supporting our children with emotional expression is that it will create an emotional monster who's going to manipulate us emotionally. So let's just address that. That's one objection, and I totally understand where this question comes from. I think it's a great question. It's based in a cognitive behavioral approach that says if you reward this negative behavior, this crying, with attention, it's going to increase it and make it more likely. Yes, good question. I had the same question when I was exploring all of this. The problem is that it's not accurate. That's a hypothesis. If you reward, the crying with lots of love and attention, it's going to cause this behavior to increase. It doesn't happen that way. So what happens when a parent begins to engage this process as an experiment to listen to their feelings, and Patty Whiffler calls this stay listening, staying calm, coming close and listening to the child as they offload their tension, is that the first time there's usually an emotional backpack. So there's a lot to offload, and the first time it can last maybe 30-40 minutes. Some people have told me it's lasted about an hour and a half, really, really long time. And then the second time it's much less, maybe half of that amount of time. And then the third time, maybe 10 minutes. So depending on how old the child is and how much is there in their emotional backpack and how calm and present the parent is, and if they're able to set some sort of a limit that helps the feelings come out, this can last a long time the first time, but then it decreases. And we also find that over time, these experiences of full, blown out tantrums and deep wailing decrease over time. I've been lucky enough to work with families where their kid started to work with me when they were 7, the beginning of elementary school, moved through elementary school into middle school, and is very well regulated and doesn't have these big tantrums. And many instances of that to report. So I know full well that this doesn't lead to increased emotional manipulation or inability to regulate oneself. Quite the opposite. Being able to get to the bottom of our feelings in the midst of a calm, regulated other, a parent, a caregiver, an attachment figure, will enable that child to have within them, integrated within them, a calming presence inside of them that says, I'm here, you're not alone, your tears are okay, let it all out. Versus if I'm crying and there's a presence that says, you're terrible, I can't believe you're doing this again, stop that right now, then we internalize that. So I'm crying, and then I have voices inside me like, I'm terrible, why can't I stop this crying, this is the worst, I'm mess, I'm broken, there's something so wrong with me. And we carry that around with us. I'm sure many of you can relate to that. And our parents did the best they could, so this isn't to blame them, have lots of compassion for them, what they taught us, what voices we have inside of us because of that. But certainly our voice, the voice of the parent, becomes the internalized voice of the child. The way we are in the midst of their emotions will become the way they are to themselves in the midst of their emotions. Unless they do a lot of work to change it. But if it's positive, they won't need to change it. They'll be grateful. It will be a gift they'll carry around with them their entire lives. So there's so much more that we could talk about. I hope you'll ask some really good questions and we can continue this discussion. Post those questions in our Facebook group if you're on Facebook. And if not, then feel free to have a dialogue amongst yourselves. You can also always email support@mindbodymoms.com with questions. We'd love to receive your questions, and it will lead us to have more conversations, more talks on these topics. Thank you for listening. I encourage you to practice this just as a little experiment, see if it works for you, and let me know any challenges that arise, because everyone will have unique challenges with stay listening. Everyone will have a different way that it triggers them, and something different that their child says or does that makes it hard to listen. And this is true even with the same family. I work with both parents. The child says and does the same thing to both of them, and yet the different things that the child says triggers them differently. So each of us will bring our own challenges to this process, and unless you really agree that there's some benefit to listening to children cry, it will be very difficult to stay grounded and calm and offer that calm, steady presence. So it's okay if you don't agree with it, just let it go, don't even try it. But if this resonates with you, if it makes sense to you and you're agreeing with this, there's a little mindset shift, then I would encourage you to move forward to try it and to know that it won't happen perfectly. It will take a lot of practice and time to fully embody this, and just be gentle with yourself as you explore. I look forward to continuing to be on this journey of parenthood and motherhood with you. Blessings.